Hello everybody, today on the channel a car I've been wanting to feature for years now. It's Japan's answer to the Mini Cooper, the pocket rocket that is the Toyota Starlet Glanza V. But has it been worth the wait, and is it worth the money that people are asking today? Well, time to find out. What we have here today is a member of the very short-lived 5th generation of Toyota Starlet, a model line that dated back to 1973. These were introduced in 1996, but discontinued just 3 years later on account of this car's successor having arrived, the Yaris. Though best known today as a darling of the import scene, we did actually get a version of the Starlet in Europe. However, we didn't get anywhere near the variety of them that they saw in Japan, where you could have the car in reflet trim, which is the base model, in luxury-orientated carrot spec, or my personal favourite, the chunky, off-road inspired and brilliantly named Remix. However, by far and away the most popular in the petrolhead community is the sports-orientated Glanza, of which there were 2 major versions, both powered by a 1331cc 4-cylinder engine. The S received a naturally aspirated variant, making around 85 horsepower, but the V got a turbocharger and 135 to 140 horsepower. Combine that with a very low curb weight of just 950 kilos, and you had a car capable of 0 to 60 in around 8.2 seconds. As you would also expect of the top performance model, the V also came with a body kit, including the distinctive bonnet scoop, the little wing at the back, and some other subtle cosmetic alterations too. I believe, but am not certain, it would have also had tweaks to the suspension and brakes, but during my research for this car, I couldn't actually find out anything to either confirm or deny that. In any case, I can tell you a little bit about this specific car because it came over from Japan a number of years ago, then passed through a few different hands, including an auction house, before it landed with its current owner, Chris, who when he got it found out that it was actually fitted with a number of very unusual optional extras, some of which are very cool, including the official Toyota parking stick over there, enabling you to see exactly where that corner of the car is, the uprated Toyota stereo featuring parcel shelf speakers and an official Toyota branded CD changer, complete with original head unit here. There was also ABS, we believe possibly a limited slip differential, but thus far Chris hasn't been able to confirm it. You even have a natty little cup holder down here and UV reflective windows too. Most remarkably, other than a set of aftermarket 15-inch wheels to replace the, I think, original 14s, this car appears entirely standard. And though it isn't a mint condition example, it has been used, driven and enjoyed, it is an absolute delight. One of the biggest issues with the Glanza and many other Japanese performance cars like it is that they often get modified, and though that isn't an inherently bad thing, it can at some points make getting hold of a standard one very difficult indeed. Allegedly, with a little bit of help, these can make up to 300 horsepower, but even without major modification, you can get about 170 out of them, and as a young man, I'm sure that would be very tempting indeed. In fact, the reason that Chris lusted after one of these is because when he was younger and studying mechanics at college, this was the car that him and all of his friends lusted after. In fact, just about all of the people that I've known who were into their Japanese cars wanted a Starlet Glanza V at some point or another, because when you are a young man considering the likes of a Clio, a Fiesta, that sort of thing, this is a very cool alternative. From the outside, it has sort of baby EP3 Civic looks, and inside it is classic 90s Japanese car. In other words, it's a combination of very functional and still high quality but somewhat uninspiring plastic switchgear and amazingly coloured fabrics. It also has a few nice little touches, including a button here which will turn the turbo into a low pressure mode, meaning it'll make just 115 horsepower, and on the dash here inside the rev counter you have 4 lights to show you exactly how much power the turbo is putting out. Yes, that's very satisfying. Though it looks positively dinky, certainly in photos and in isolation, it's actually a little bigger than it may first appear. It's larger than even the second generation of BMW Mini. Had you told me it was smaller than all of them, I'd have believed you. But it's not. It's still not big, however, it does give you just about enough room in here for 4 adults, or more accurately, 4 teenagers who are happy to be a little bit cramped, and the boot's an okay size. Not radically different to, say, the Mini, but not as good as a Fiesta. Headroom is just about okay. You do certainly feel perched on the seat. I'm not sure it really has any height adjustment, but it will not go any lower than I've currently got it. I've had to lean the back a little bit so I can get in the car comfortably. However, I would say the majority of drivers under, say, 6'2", 6'3", will still be able to fit, although it may come at the cost of a rear passenger space. This car actually replaced a Toyota GT86, which I'm sure many would consider a backward step. However, Chris said that the issue with that car was that despite it looking quite sporty, it wasn't really all that quick. This is the other way around, and he really likes that. And as he used that car as his daily, it did have a few issues, particularly in the winter, which led him to fall out of love with it. Notably, the battery drained itself a little bit too quickly, and as the car has frameless windows, he got a little bit tired of, on occasion when the car was frozen, not being able to get into it. But the nature of JDM scene tags meant that in order to switch his GT86 for the considerably older, smaller and lower specified Starlet involved essentially paying the same money. He got a little bit of a refund on this, but nowhere near the thousands and thousands of pounds back that I'm sure you're all expecting. So then, just one question remains to be answered. Was he right to do so? Is this another example of a Japanese car as overrated as it is overpriced, or is it really that good? Well, let's change down a gear and find out. So I am currently driving around in a brand spanking new Mini Cooper S, and this car has just shown me everything wrong with that. You see, the Mini is a nice, big, more grown up, more refined car, which I don't have a problem with. However, in that process, it's also lost a little bit of the magic. This is certainly, no doubt whatsoever, a much slower car, but it also puts a bigger smile on your face. It's got just the right amount of power. The engine doesn't really even feel particularly turbocharged. Lag is nearly imperceptible, and it will rev happily to its 7 and a bit thousand RPM redline, although for the last sort of 1,000 RPM, there isn't much of a reward for staying with it. The gearbox is also a delight. The throw is kind of medium in length, but with very little play in it and a real nice notchiness about it. The brakes are great too. The pedal's not too firm, but it responds fairly keenly, and it feels like the car will stand on its front end. That may be down to the fact that this car has nice 195 section wide tyres on with 50 profiles. When Chris got it, it was wearing 175 60s, and as a result he said it felt very, very skittish. I'm sure it did. The suspension, meanwhile, you can tell it's still a somewhat sporty setup, but it's got more than enough compliance to deal with most of what the road has to throw at me. In fact, the biggest issue really is the fact that something in the back is rattling, so it's making the car sound a lot less refined than it actually is. Though the power figure of around 135 horses isn't the biggest or most impressive, and sources did disagree on exactly how much this car had, the combination of the low curb weight and that turbocharged mid-range torque means that even if you are in maybe a gear too high, it actually still pulls fairly nicely. Were this a naturally aspirated car with the same amount of power, I think it would be struggling a bit more than it is. Then, to complete the package, you have the steering, which is still on the light side, as it should be in a small, practical, daily drivable car. but it's got lots of feel, it's got lots of feedback, it talks to you all the time, and because the suspension is soft enough that the car does move, when you hit the brakes, it pitches forward. You know exactly how much you're asking of it, and it makes the whole thing a lot more engaging, a lot more interactive, a lot more exciting. Oh, hell. There is currently only one example of these on Auto Trader, and they're asking about £8,500. In fairness, Auto Trader isn't really the sort of place that I go to buy a car like this. Really, you want to either import it through the likes of Torque GT or try and buy one from an enthusiast owner that's had it for a few years. To get one in this kind of condition with the near no modifications that it has is really quite remarkable, and I'm glad to have had the opportunity because this does show you what a fundamentally right package it is. Currently, Chris has plans to change only one thing about the car, and that's the exhaust. He's bought a Fujitsu Legalis R system, which is only mildly fruitier than standard on account of the fact that the stock pipe is beginning to look a little crusty. He was originally going to wait until it essentially rusted through before replacing it, but my advice to him was to simply take it off now so that he can save the original pipe and put the Fujitsu on and enjoy the slightly nicer noise, which I do think the car would benefit from. As you can probably tell in the drive-by shots, it's not particularly vocal. Doing my research for this car was actually surprisingly difficult, despite the fact that we've nearly all heard of the Starlet Glanza. Because in the UK they're still a relatively rare thing, it wasn't actually easy to find out much about them. The one common thread with everything I read though wasn't that you should avoid buying a modified example, because honestly if you were going to try and do that you're going to have a hard time, but instead to look at what the modifications are, check the brands on them, make sure they're well known, good quality parts, and that the car hasn't led too hard a life. These being Japanese import cars that were popular with younger petrol heads back when they weren't worth quite so much money means that many have led a hard life, and things like corrosion and worn parts do need to be looked out for. I am told there are many pieces on this car, like say these wind deflectors, which look rather innocuous, that can be either impossible or very expensive to replace. In the case of these, some £300. The dashes apparently like to crack, and though this one is currently fine, Chris did a little bit of research and found that the only example he could get his hands on was in Australia. So even the cost of shipping was going to be expensive, and that's before you look at the part itself. This is why modified examples shouldn't simply be discounted, because there is a good chance that in many cases the part was put on not because the owner wanted to improve it in some way, shape or form, but they just wanted to maintain it, and getting the original item was just no longer possible. So then, there we have it. That is the Toyota Starlet Glanza V. Ignore the JDM bit, this is a cracking little hot hatch full stop, and for me joins the likes of the VW Lupo GTI as one of my favourite super minis. I want to say a big thank you to Chris for bringing it out, and as ever to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below and subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.